Well, every summer, our town celebrates Betty Zane Days. It's coming up here in a few weeks, and we tell the story because it's a part of who we are. It's the history of our city, and if you don't know it, it kind of goes like this. In September of 1782, Fort Henry was under attack, and the defenders were running out of gunpowder. So you remember the story, I think? Without it, the fort would fall. And so Betty Zane, a young 17-year-old girl, decided to volunteer to make the 60-yard dash to her house. And so she sprinted out of safety of the fort across open ground while enemy bullets flew by her, and she reached her family's cabin, grabbed the gunpowder, and ran back through the gunfire. One ordinary woman, one very courageous decision, right? And then history changed forever, and now we have a carnival in town every year to celebrate this. And most people have no idea. Betty Zane Days, who is that, right? But the truth is, we love stories like that. We love stories of ordinary people used to do extraordinary things to accomplish something far bigger than themselves, don't we? I mean, I love that. That's what I love. Sometimes, we know this, sometimes God uses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes. But if we're honest, there are moments when we look at our own lives and we wonder, God, what are you doing? Are you doing anything at all right now? Sometimes we can even wonder, do you even see what's happening all around us? And maybe you've looked at your family, your health, your job situation. Maybe you just look at our nation every day unfold and you wonder, God, where are you in this moment? And listen, that's not because you stopped believing, not even a little bit. You wonder these things because sometimes He seems silent. And that's exactly why I love the book of Esther, and I think you will too. Because this book answers one of the biggest questions that we ask ourselves. Sorry. What is God doing when it seems like God isn't doing anything? One of the most surprising facts about Esther is this. You may not know this, but God's name never appears in the book of Esther. Not once. There is no thus saith the Lord in there. There's no prophet, no miracle, no burning bush, no Red Sea moment, no pillar of fire. There's no mention of the Ten Commandments. If you are reading Esther for the very first time, and I pray you do as we go along, chapter by chapter, you may wonder, where is God? And yet, listen to me, He is on every page. Charles Swindoll said it this way, and I love it. He said this, God may seem invisible, but He is invincible. I love that statement because while God's name may be absent from Esther, listen, His fingerprints are on every page of it. Some people ask, if God's name isn't mentioned, then why are we even studying the book of Esther? Well, it's because every book in the Bible ultimately points us to Christ. Jesus told the religious leaders this. He said, you search the scriptures, and it is they that bear witness to me. Our job isn't simply to find Esther. Our job is always to find Christ. Now, over the next several weeks, we're going to watch God quietly arrange people and events and timing and circumstances and until His plan unfolds beautifully. And that is your challenge, and that is my challenge, to find it, to see it, to search for it. One of the greatest themes of Esther is the sovereignty of God. Listen, God is never reacting. He's never panicking. God has never looked at a situation and said, I didn't see that coming. That's not God. I mean, throughout history, rulers have believed that they control the world. From Pharaoh to Nebuchadnezzar to Caesar. We'll learn about another one today. And every one of them eventually discovered that they weren't really in charge. There is a king above every king. Now, during World War II, something strange began appearing all over the world. You can find it on walls, on bridges, on ships, on bombed-out buildings. Someone had written this phrase, "Kilroy was here." American soldiers found it in England and in France and Germany. They found it in the Philippines. They found it in Tokyo. They found it everywhere. And it became one of the greatest mysteries of the war because it seemed like Kilroy had been everywhere. Now, Kilroy hadn't literally been everywhere, but his mark just kept showing up everywhere. And you know, in many ways, that's what the book of Esther is like. You won't find God's name written across its pages. You won't hear his voice. You won't see miracles. But everywhere you look, his fingerprints are there. His providence is there. His timing is there. Listen, you will see his hand there through all of this. And it's wonderful. And maybe that's exactly where some of you are today. Like I said earlier, you can't see God or feel like you can't hear him or you don't understand what he's doing right now. But that does not mean he is absent. It just simply means he's working in ways that you can't see. So as we begin, let's remember one simple truth. God may seem invisible, but what? He is invincible. Don't forget it. It's a theme. Keep it going. So before we introduce, and we are introduced to Esther, or even to Mordecai, these are some of the names that you will hear later, we are introduced to a king today, and a queen, but our main focus will be on a king. His name is Xerxes. You may have heard of him. You may have seen him. If you watched the movie 300, he is the ruler of that movie, right? If you had lived in 483 BC, you would know that he is the most powerful man in the world. You would have looked at Xerxes and you would have thought, no one, and I do mean no one, can stop this man. And that's exactly what the author of the book of Esther wants you to think. Because at the end of chapter 1, we're going to discover something that is very different than that. So let's begin in verse 1. Our first point today is this: the world's empire. I say the world's. I should not be of the world, right? The world's empire is inescapable. Esther chapter 1, verse 1. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. Now, before we're introduced to anybody else, the author introduces us to an empire. King Ahasuerus, better known as Xerxes, ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. This wasn't a small kingdom. You may have trouble wrapping that around your brain right now, but it was the largest empire the world had ever seen. To the people in 483 BC, this was the world, with the exception of one small piece of Greece. If you were a Jewish exile, there was nowhere, and I do mean nowhere, for you to run. Wherever you looked, all you saw was Persia, the Persian Empire. Their laws, their culture, their influence. You would see Persian power everywhere you walked because the empire was inescapable. Wherever you went, they were under control of them. Now notice something surprising. The book of Esther doesn't begin in Jerusalem, does it? It doesn't start in the temple of the Lord. It begins in a pagan palace, because that's where God's people were living. They were living in the middle of a culture that didn't know or honor God. Doesn't that sound familiar? Can you relate? Sometimes we wish we could escape. Don't you? If I could just get away from all of this evil, if I could just leave and run away and get away from temptation and all this brokenness of this world. But listen to me, that's not what Jesus prayed for his followers, is it? Listen to his words in John 17:15. Listen to what Jesus says. He says, I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. Jesus never asked the Father to remove us from the world. He asked the Father to protect us in the world. Church, listen to me. God hasn't called us to run away from culture, but he did call us to represent him in our culture. Paul says it this way, Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Notice he doesn't say, leave the world. He doesn't say, what he does say, though, is don't let the world shape you. I think one of the best illustrations for this is this. A boat, what's its job? A boat is supposed to be in the water, right? That's exactly where it belongs. But the moment that the water gets inside of the boat, it begins to sink. And that's us. God has called us to live in the world. Just don't let the world get inside of you. And that's the challenge that Esther and Mordecai and the Jews, all the God-fearing people at this time that we will meet later, that's their challenge, because they couldn't escape Persia. So the real question was whether Persia would shape their hearts. And that's still the question for all of us every single day of our lives that we live in the world. Because Persia looks unbeatable. If you had lived in Esther's day, you would have never imagined anyone ever defeating them. And that's exactly where the author takes us next. Second point, the world's empire appears invincible. Esther 1, 2, and 3. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all of his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him. If the first thing that we learn about Persia is that it is inescapable, then the second thing is this: it appears invincible. Notice who is gathered in Susa. This wasn't just any old banquet. This was a summit of the world power. Military commanders, government officials, provincial governors, all of them, nobles from everywhere. If you wanted to know where the most powerful people in the world were at this time, they were there at this banquet. They're all in a room. And standing above all of them was King Xerxes. No one could challenge him. No one could rival his wealth or match his army. If you had lived in that day, you probably would have looked at Persia and you would have just thought, listen, this is how it's going to be forever. This is how it will be. Imagine how it must have felt if you were one of God's people who were living there in exile, taken away from your home, hundreds of miles away. Your temple had been destroyed and then rebuilt. But many of the Jews remained scattered throughout the empire. And everywhere you look, you see reminders of Persian power. It would have been easy to wonder and think to yourself, Has the world become stronger than God? If you were living at this time, it would have been easy. But listen, some people feel this today because there are times when the world seems to have more influence than the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is a lie. It is not true. I'm telling you that today. There are moments when it feels like evil is winning. And maybe you felt that personally in your life when you look at everything around you and you wonder, God, are you still in control? You feel what these people are feeling at this time right here. That's exactly why Esther is in our Bible, because appearances are not reality. Jesus told his disciples this in John 16:33. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Notice he didn't promise some easy life. He just promised he would bring us victory. Victory in Jesus, right? That's the difference. When you read Esther 1, the spotlight is on Xerxes. He looks like the king, a big bad king who's in control of everything. But the reader already knows something that Xerxes doesn't. That there is another king, a king whose throne is not in Susa, but in heaven. A king who doesn't need an army to accomplish his purposes. A king who is never threatened by earthly rulers. Xerxes thinks he's directing history, but in reality, he's simply just a character in God's story. And that's still true today. Because listen, there is no election, no nation, no ruler that has ever threatened the reign of Jesus Christ's rule. The kingdom of the world may seem invincible, but only one kingdom is eternal. Now, if you wanted the world to believe that your kingdom was unbeatable, what would you do? How would you convince them if you were Xerxes? You're going to see, you would show everybody your wealth, your luxury. You would show them all your success. You'd leave them thinking, I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. How powerful. And that's exactly what Xerxes does for 6 months. He throws the most extravagant celebration the ancient world has ever seen. Number 3, the world's empire seems desirable. Verses 4 through 8. While he showed the riches of his royal glory, and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days. In fact, 180, we see, days. And when these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. Listen to what this place looked like. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods and marble pillars. And also, get this, couches of gold and silver. Doesn't sound too comfortable. On a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And drinking was according to this edict. He said, there is no compulsion, for the king has given orders to all the staff of the palace to do as each man desired. Do what you want. It's on my tab. If the first thing that impresses you about is the size of the empire, and the second thing is its power, then surely the third thing is its beauty. Notice how the pace of the story suddenly just slows down a little bit. And the author could have simply just said Xerxes threw a party. He threw a banquet. Instead, he just describes every single detail of the place, the curtains, the pillars, marble and golden couches, and mosaic floors, and, oh my goodness, wine, royal wine flowing for everybody, as much as you want. Even drinking cups, they were unique. He wants us to see exactly that, what the guests saw in that day, and they saw it for 180 days. Xerxes displayed all the riches and glory of his kingdom. It wasn't just a banquet. This was an advertisement. Every detail was filled with the same message that we see every time we watch commercials on TV every day. Look at what the world can offer you. Look at how amazing. That's how the world works. It knows how to make itself look beautiful. It promises happiness and success and security and all the pleasures of life, and you will get all the recognition that you ever wanted. It tells you if you just had a little bit more, a little more money, a little more success and influence, then and only then you'll be satisfied. And First John and John warns us of this. He says, don't fall into this lie. 1 John 2:15 and 16, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all this that is in this world, listen to me, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father, but it is from where? The world. Did you catch that? The desires of the eyes. The world appeals to what we can see. It dazzles us. It promises way more than it can ever deliver. But here's what the world never advertises. It never shows you what's behind the Wizard of Oz's curtain, does it? It doesn't tell you that the palace that is filled with gold is also filled with pride. It doesn't tell you that behind the beautiful decorations are all of these broken relationships and selfish ambition and empty hearts that you will notice through this book. And that's exactly what we're about to discover. In only a few verses, this magnificent banquet that is thrown will become the setting of drunkenness and anger and humiliation and foolish decisions. The palace that once glittered on the outside, and that's what it was doing, but the people who are on the inside are broken. And that's the truth still today about the world. The world is always making promises that it can't keep. That's why Jesus refused Satan's offer in the wilderness when Satan showed him all the kingdoms of the world and his glory, and Jesus refused to bow down to him. Because Jesus knew what every follower of God must eventually learn, that this world is only temporary. Its beauty fades, treasures rust, and kingdoms rise and they fall. But the kingdom of God endures forever. So don't fall in love with the kingdom of this world because it won't last. Number 4. The world's empire is dangerous. If all we knew about Persia came from the very first 8 verses, we might actually envy it, wouldn't we? It all seems so attractive, but now the author pulls back that curtain and we get to see what it actually really looks like. And we discover behind all that glitter is darkness. Verse 10 says, on the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he was what? Drunk. Very drunk. The man who appeared in control of the entire world couldn't even control himself. And so instead of leading with wisdom, he begins being led by all of his appetites. So in his drunken state, he sends for the queen, Queen Vashti. Why? Well, verse 11 tells us. To bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. He doesn't call her because he loves her. I want my wife here with me. He calls her because he wants to display her. The same king who spent 6 months displaying his kingdom now wants to display his wife. And most theologians believe that he wanted her wearing only a crown. Okay? She wasn't being treated as a person. She was just being treated as another possession, another trophy on the wall, another symbol of his greatness. And you know something? That's what the world always does. It turns people into objects. People become valuable only because of what they can do and provide for you. The world only cares what it can get out of you. And then something in the story of remarkable happens. Queen Vashti refuses. She said, "No, I'm not coming." She told the king no. I mean, nobody does that. And suddenly, the most powerful man in the entire world, with all these beautiful things, couches of gold, everything, the most powerful man in the entire world hears no. Verse 12 says, "At this the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him." His pride can't handle rejection at all. So the king, who appeared to rule 127 provinces, the entire known world, this same king couldn't even rule his own heart. Listen, this is the danger of the world's empire. It promises freedom, but it produces slavery. That's what it does. Xerxes wasn't free. He was enslaved to his own pride, his desires, his anger. Sin always makes promises that it can't keep. It often offers pleasure, but eventually, in the end, it demands payment. The book of James tells us that desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So the palace looks beautiful, but beneath its beauty is brokenness. And that's still true today. So when you hear the world say, "Follow your heart, do what makes you happy," realize those promises, they end and they leave countless people empty and broken and addicted, all those things, searching for something that the world can never give them. The world can't give you freedom, only Jesus Christ can. So don't judge the world's kingdom by its advertisements. I challenge you to judge it by its fruit. Jesus said it, you will recognize them by their fruits. And what's the fruit that we should be bearing? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And yet, we see the fruit of Xerxes' kingdom is what? Drunkenness, pride, anger, humiliation, and chaos. The world's kingdom is far, far, far more dangerous than it first appears. And what a contrast we see when we find Jesus, because we see Xerxes exalting himself, but we see Jesus humbled himself to save us. We see Xerxes demanding others serve him, and we see Jesus saying in Mark 10:45, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." I mean, one king used people and the other one died for them. And that's the difference between the two kingdoms. By now, you'd expect the king to handle this crisis wisely, wouldn't you? After all, he rules the greatest empire in all of the world. Surely the most powerful king in the world has wise counselors, and this situation will be handled with dignity. Instead, the story becomes almost laughable. The last point, 5, the world's empire is laughable. Sit back and laugh. What happens next almost reads like satire. Remember who you're talking about. This man who ruled the entire world, the commander of one of the greatest armies in history, the wealthiest man in the world, who appeared to be untouchable. And now we find the greatest crisis facing his empire is that his wife told him no. The king who appeared to control the world can't even control his own house. He thought he was in charge. So what does he do? He calls an emergency meeting about this. He has the greatest legal minds in all of the land come in and talk to him and give him advice. What shall we do about Queen Vashti? Then listen to Memucan's advice. He said, if Vashti gets away with this, then every woman in the empire will hear about it. Every wife will start disrespecting their husbands. An entire empire could unravel under this one problem. Can you imagine? One woman says no, and suddenly they think civilization itself is just going to crumble. So they pass a law declaring that every husband should be a master in his own house. Do you see the irony? I mean, if you have to pass a law telling everybody that you're in charge, are you really in charge? The king who spent 6 months displaying his greatness now has to legislate respect in his own home. The empire that looked so powerful just moments ago, as we read, now looks incredibly insecure. And that's what pride always does. It makes us take ourselves far more seriously than we should. Proverbs 16:18, you've heard of it. Pride comes before the fall. And that's exactly what's happening. The kingdom that looked invincible is beginning to crack everywhere. And here's the lesson. Human kingdoms always overestimate themselves. They believe they'll last forever, but they never do. Every kingdom eventually falls, and every ruler is eventually replaced, but there is one king who reigns forever. Psalm 2, read it later. It paints the picture. It says, the kings of the earth, they gather together, they make their plans, they flex their power and their might, and they believe that they're in control. And what does God do? Verse 4 says, he who sits in heaven laughs. The kingdom of this world is laughable. He laughs because no human kingdom has ever threatened his throne. And that's exactly what Esther, the book of Esther, wants us to see. That while Xerxes thinks he's making history, God is directing history. And Persia believes it's in control, but the invisible king is invincible. And he is accomplishing his purposes. And that's still true today. Not once, not even for a single moment, has God surrendered his throne to anyone. So the kingdoms of this world may appear impressive, but make no mistake about it. My God reigns. So, when we began this morning, I asked you this question: what is God doing when it seems like he isn't doing anything at all? And to me, I believe Esther chapter 1 gives an amazing answer. Even though God never speaks, he never performs miracles, his name is never mentioned, yet he is in absolute control of everything. So while Xerxes acts like he's tough and flexes for everybody, God is quietly preparing the stage for salvation and is accomplishing his purposes. While the world tries to impress, heaven isn't impressed at all. And maybe that's what we all need to remember when we look at our circumstances in life. And all we see is the power of this world, and Persia, power. And we feel so insignificant. And we wonder, where are you, God? The book of Esther tells us where he is. He's on his throne. So even though you may not see him, he is there. He is invincible. And I would add this: when God seems silent, he is still sovereign. So this week, I challenge you, don't be impressed with the kingdoms of this world. Don't let the headlines shake your faith. Because there is a king above every king, a lord above every lord. And while the world sees Xerxes on the throne, we see the King of Kings. Amen? And his kingdom will never, ever end. So chapter 1. Chapter 1 introduces us to the man that everyone thought was the king. And we'll see that the rest of the book of Esther introduces us to the God who actually is. Will you pray with me?